Hello everybody, bienvenido a todo. Welcome to Vabrut with me, Vabrut, and we are in, well, we're always in training sim mode. It's what I do. We are in the West Coast Main Line again, and we are going to do the, well, you'll see, it's a surprise. It's not going to be much of a surprise if you've watched my last couple of videos, but it's a partially a surprise. So we are in the network rail measuring train, and this is like a properly modded one. Look, it's got like the little laser at the front that measures things, and a big shiny headlight, and it's the four carriages, yeah, with the things each end. Oh, and it's got like, well, I think the interiors are just standard GWR ones, but you know, that's still pretty impressive. It's got the nameplate, John Armitt. I don't know who he was, but I guess he measured things. So, the interior is a little bit weathered and nicer. But anyway, let's get going. So we don't have to open doors or anything because I think we're technically like freight. We do need to turn a few things on. I'm going to turn that on because it's cold. Actually, I don't know what this does, but I want my train supposed to be bright today. And I don't think I need to do anything there. And I did resist myself putting dynamic weather on. So although it's cold and it's winter and it's December, in this scenario, it's I have it will not snow. It will not snow. Just checking, is there anything else in here they've modded to make nice and snazzy, or is it all? Well, that light doesn't work. I guess that might be a radar as well. It looks like a headlight though, doesn't it? Oh, I need to... Oh, you know what I need to do? Start preparing my brakes down to 1. Turn on my instrument lights. It's just a thing. There we go. Everything here should be alright. Can I sand in this? No, this doesn't have sanding. Too old. Oh, well, okay, I can just go then. Because obviously there's no waiting for people. Cap light there, but I don't want to. Now we might be a little bit faster or speeding up in this because it's a very short train. Oh, look at that. Lovely jubbly. And we can just pretend we're measuring stuff. Milton Keynes, 44 miles and no stops. But I wonder if we're going to be on the fast lines, hopefully. Because, oh well, I mean, no, we won't be able to go to 125, will we? Because we're not a tilty train. Sadly, we are the other product of the 70s, the diesel multiple unit. Well, it's a loco, but they run in pairs. Whereas the APTE, sadly, as the other child of the 70s, didn't quite make it. Otherwise known as the Queasy Rider. If you don't know the story of the APT, which was like, this is like the train of the 70s, diesel, 2 locos, one at either end of the train. Neither quite powerful on their own, but together they can launch a train, get a train up to 125 miles an hour. And they were like, they were called the high-speed train, and they were the high-speed train at their time. Introduced 125 mile an hour running on the, regular 125 mile an hour running. There had been speed records and stuff before, but 125 mile an hour regular running on the Great Western Main Line down to Bristol, and on the East Coast Main Line up to Scotland, and they didn't really use them on the West Coast Main Line because that was electrified in the 50s before they were built. So that was very much centered around locos from the Class 81 to the Class 87. Oh, and then of course they were made it to the Midland Main Line as well, and they started using them on cross-country services at some point. I mean, they are very ubiquitous. Like, if you look at books about trains from the 80s, there's usually a picture of this as a representation of a UK train. But alongside that, at the same time, a different part of British Rail. So this was back in the days when everything was nationalised, and this, as it was originally would have been developed by British Rail themselves, would have been built by them. And at the same time, the different part of British Rail was very interested in tilting trains, and because that was like a technology that was being investigated in different parts of the world all at the same time. And British Rail had been sort of developing, I think the first attempt was it was called the APT-C, and it was gas turbine powered. And then that was sort of very a prototype. I mean, it looks really weird even when you see it now, and it had like it was similar setup to this, like a gas turbine loco at either end, and then with like articulated carriages in between, so not like this. But then the oil crisis in the 70s, I think, sort of made sort of massively sort of killed the gas turbine thing, because the original TGV was gas turbine powered as well. The first prototype was supposed to be a fueled not by electricity but by rocket power. Well, no, turbines aren't rocket power, but they can be very fast. But they also use a lot of fuel. So that killed that APT project. Also, if you look at it, it has a tiny little windscreen right at the top. It's really hard to, if you go look it up, APT. And then the APT-C, the APT-C, that's what the APT-C was. The APT-E was the next version of it, which was intended to be a electric electric train, kind of a multiple unit, but not in any traditional sense, and it was going to be operated by, so the tilt was operated by like sort of like airbags rather than straight up hydraulics, and it, like back then there were kind of certain safety regulations that meant you couldn't. What were the regulations? There was something strange, like you weren't allowed to, for electric trains, you basically couldn't have really high voltage wires running down the length of the train. Like nowadays you can, like the way that the Pendolinos work is that they have cables that transfer all of the energy that's brought in from the pantograph down through the carriages to the traction motors underneath each carriage. But back then there were like rules and regulations that says you couldn't do that, and British Rail didn't want to do a loco at the front of each end because they thought it would be too heavy, and it might not work properly for tilting. So instead they came up with you had sort of your driving cars, quite similar to say a driving van trailer, and then a rake of like maybe 4 or 5 carriages, and then there was a power car, and then there was another power car, and these were just sort of in the middle of the train, like in the center of the train. So say you had like a 10-car train or like a 12-car train, 2 center cars were power cars. They both had a pantograph, and it was all sort of, wow, pretty interesting. And I think they did a shorter version. They just had 1 power car and then a few carriages at either end. And then on the other side of the train it was the same, sort of more carriages and then another driving car. But it was a very odd setup because the power car you couldn't walk through it, which meant both sides of each side of the train was marooned from the other. So they both had to have their own like catering and staff in it. It wasn't very useful. It wasn't. I mean, no no trains use that kind of setup now. There are some like hybrid trains that have like diesel motors in like a sort of articulated centre carriage. You can see them on Greater Anglia and Transport for Wales, but you can pass through it, I think. It's not like the APT was. But anyway, they sort of introduced it in I think it was the very early 80s or very, very late 70s, and it was a disaster. They hadn't set up the tilting properly, so it tilted too late going into the corner, I think, and it made people feel like sick. And then it took them, for some reason, it took them quite a few years to sort of fix it, but it was just to sort of change the timing so that it started tilting before it went into the corner, and that seemed to solve it. And then it sort of performed. I mean, they broke down a few times as well, and they got really bad press because they were very expensive, and there was only 2 prototypes, I think, working prototypes. Maybe there were 4. I think the intention was to build 4, but I know that there were at least 2. I don't know if they ever built the full 4. And they basically would. I mean, well, they were a victim of their own publicity, to be fair, because like British Rail touted them as the future, and so the press were all over them. And then when they failed and broke down, it was like a big deal. But when you look back, the amount of money they spent on like what would have been a sort of, well, also British Rail were a bit delusional when you think about what they were trying to do. So whereas this was like high-speed train, 125 miles an hour, and it's going to work on existing infrastructure, and like, well, they actually ended up being around for nearly 50 years, the HSTs, and they did work on existing infrastructure, and even on day 1 they were able to get to 125 miles an hour on some stretches of line. You didn't need to change any of the infrastructure to accommodate them, like no new signalling, things like that. I mean, the signalling would have to accommodate fast trains anyway, like that goes into the line speed. But if the signalling had been set up for higher speeds, which much of it already had been at that stage, because there were trains that could run in excess of 100 miles an hour. Wasn't common, but it was possible. Look at that man on the gantry. Look at that. The HST. So that's why the HST was such a success, and they kept building them, and they exported them to Australia as well, or a version of them. Whereas, unfortunately, the APT-E couldn't do much without additional infrastructure, so it ended up needing. Because the distance between the tracks at some parts of the line, and also the fact it goes through tunnels, means that when the train is tilting, there's a risk it could like hit things. Which means there needed to be parts of the line where it doesn't tilt. But you couldn't necessarily rely on a driver to just press a button and say, yeah, tilt now, tilt not now. So it had to be some kind of automated system. So that's where what is now TASS kind of originated in the 80s. They came up with a system to basically tell the train when it couldn't tilt. Well, when it couldn't go, tell the train when it was allowed to go above a certain speed and when it wasn't. But yeah, it was so it was expensive, and for these 2 trains, it does hold the speed record for getting from one end of the West Coast Main Line to the other. But Virgin Trains very nearly broke it. It was like, oh god, less than a few minutes, I think, behind it, in regular traffic as well. And that APT-E, I think, was given. Back when, in the days when it was all controlled by British Rail, was given a lot of help along the way, and I think ran at over line speed as well. So it did run up to 140, whereas you can't do that now because of health and safety. But yeah, back in the day, British Rail really did think that this train was going to be 160 miles an hour, running up and down the West Coast Main Line with no track train protection system. Like, they didn't even have TPWS back then. They just had AWS. That was it. And as you know, AWS, if we were coming to a red now and AWS went, gave me a big honk, I could just press acknowledge and then carry on driving through it. Nothing else will stop it. It's only TPWS that will stop me if I acknowledge and then ignore. And there was nothing like that back then. to stop drivers going through red lights. So 160 miles an hour was crazy to even think. So yeah, by the end of the 80s, it just hadn't really proven itself. So the government sort of cancelled the project. Or just, I think they just basically said, we're not going to give you any money for it. So British Rail were like, okay. Well, also because by the end of the 80s, the most in need line of new trains was the East Coast Main Line, because it needed new electric trains because it was being electrified, and the APTE wasn't even very suitable for that because it's not a very curvy line, and it didn't have any of the infrastructure they put on the West Coast Main Line, so there was no point in buying that train. So they came up with the Class 91s instead, and then the Class 90 came alongside that, and that was sort of subclass 90s were cascaded to the West Coast Main Line as well, passenger services, to replace those 81s to 86s that were sort of getting on a bit. And that's the story of the APT. It kind of ended there. Like one of the prototypes was scrapped. One was saved, but like not in rail condition. It's at Crewe Heritage Centre now. You drive if you go on to Manchester, you drive past it. At Crewe. Just like abandoned. They use it for like, it's like a little, you could like rent it. It's for events. It gets like a repaint every now and again. It got a repaint recently, I think. I say recently, like when I say recently, I mean like in the past 12 years. Since I've been an adult, it's been repainted. But it's not in working order or anything. You couldn't take it out on the line now. Like I don't think any of the electrical equipment is maintained or anything like that. But they probably do like sort of zhuzh it up a bit every now and again, like reupholster the seats and things like that, or refluff them, stuff like that. It's really it's the only example that still exists. I'm not sure if it's even a full rake. It might only just be like 6 carriages and a single power car. I don't know if it's like one of the full 12 or 13 car sets they used to have. But yeah, it was very unceremoniously dropped, and I think the actual technology for the tilting got sold as well. But by that point, Italy had already been doing. Italy had already had its Pendolino, and it even sold a version of it to Spain as a prototype. But then Spain went for its Talgo tilting train. So like, really, although people will go on about how the APT was like the definition of tilted trains and it invented them, it didn't. That like Italy had been working on them. There was I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Italy that bought the technology, but it might have been oh, what's its name? Oh, goodbye. It might have also been Switzerland, because I think Sadler, is it, or another one over there, also just tilted trains. Look how gorgeous it looks though. But anyway, so the APT was kind of like the very distant cousin of this. I mean, they weren't really related technologically, but I think they had the same windscreen. And actually the APT sort of colours did eventually inspire partially the Intercity rebrand in the 80s. So a lot of the prototypes BR did were like wear sort of stripy colours and stuff, and bear in mind this was during the BR Blue days, and the APT had this sort of red-white stripes down the side, and then it was sort of like a grey colour on top, and a light grey underneath, which is basically what the Intercity executive colours were. So that was its legacy, basically. Oof, this windscreen is so weirdly foggy, isn't it? Oh, it's gorgeous though, isn't it? Oh. New measurement train with Great Western interior. I don't think it has these luxurious seats inside it, the actual train itself. Oh, it's quite nice driving along this in a HST. 110 is perfect because on a flat or a slight hill, the third throttle position just works fine. Oh, we're going to overtake this 350 because he's just leaving that station, and we are going to overtake it because we're already at 110 and it's accelerating to 110. And even though it doesn't have the same physics when they're AI trains, they can't just get to 110. They do still have to try and get there. And I'm just like, haha! I shall overtake you! Bye! Improving your railway. That. Lovely. Well, look, I gave you a history lesson on the APT. Isn't that nice? It has its fans. I mean, I think it's a really nice looking train, that's for sure. And I do like the idea of it, because I mean, ultimately, what it was trying, the Pendolino basically came and did 20 years later. But the Pendolinos are much better trains than the APT was. The only thing the APT had going for it is that it had big windows. Because the Pendolino windows are tiny. But that's apparently because they've learned hard lessons about how when two trains go past each other at full tilt, it can create a wind vortex that would suck a window out. So they have to make them a certain size with like strengthened glass. But also, like, it tells you what was acceptable when and how attitudes change, because the amount of money spent on APT compared to how much was spent on buying the Pendolinos and upgrading the West Coast Main Line to deliver them, and then compare that to HS2, and you think back to like how like politically impossible it was for the APT in the 80s. Whereas now the country is building like an entirely new railway that just links London and Birmingham with no intermediate stops. Has to get a whole new signalling system, whole new trains that have to be compatible with high-speed line and the. Oh no! I turned off my controller. Oh shite! Oh no! Oh no! Shit! Oh! I pulled the battery out of my controller, didn't I? Oh, do you think I can get brake pressure back up before I slow down to 0 or back down? Come on. Oh, is there not? There isn't going to be a brake pressure release, is there anywhere in here? Oh, no. Sod's law, isn't it? Like my mouse had gone to sleep and my controller, I pulled the battery out. That's what happens when you try and talk about technology in the APT. Do I need to put the reverse it into neutral or off, maybe? Is there a release button somewhere? Oh, what is there? Is there a button for this? I feel like... Oh, do I have to reset that? Maybe that's what I have to do. Do something. Nope, doesn't seem to. Do I put it in neutral? Or off? Anything? Hmm. Oh, did that do something? Oh, there we go. That was it. Okay. Wow, well, I learned something new. One, I can't drive trains. And two, how to release the brakes on a TPWS or an AWS HST. I don't think I've ever done that on HST, you know. What does that say? Because the AWS is so easy that like it's never been a problem, and then just the one day. Oh well, we can saunter on. It's going to add about 10 minutes to the journey, because it'll take us so long to get back up to power. I bet there's a Pendolino behind us who's like, "What? What is going on? Why am I being brought down to a red?" Oh, it's not. It's not. It's a 350. But I'm sure he's livid. Well, sorry, I can't do much because like there's no way to make HST accelerate faster. I bet the APT didn't have this problem. But yeah, like I mentioned, it'll be interesting to see if because the Preston to Carlisle route is based in the era when there would have been APTs. The only problem is because they were never fully, there wasn't a full fleet of them, they didn't actually do that many services really. So it would be an expensive DLC to produce, and there wouldn't really be much timetable value to it. It would just be, you'd have to like free roam it most of the time. But you could theoretically, that's special boring business livery. You could theoretically do a pretend timetable. It's like, oh, imagine if, but I don't think people who want a simulation want that. There is one in Train Simulator, but it's like an advanced, similar to the DBBR101 Expert. So yeah, I guess maybe someone could do it. I mean, how nice it would be. I mean, because it's dead. It's a dead train. There's no, like, the only example that exists is non-functional. Can't run on the line or anything. So it would be nice to like have it alive somewhere. But just, yeah, like, how would you get recordings for that or things like that? I live secretly in hope that someone will do it. I just don't think there's like money in it. I mean, well, if someone did it for Train Sim World, I mean, or Train Simulator Classic, there must be some value to it. But I assume it was quite expensive. And for Train Sim World, it's much more complicated to model and get the physics right. So more time, which means they might have to like justify an even higher cost for it. But there's not often going to be an upper limit for things I wouldn't pay. I'll give you an example. So Flight Simulator 2024 is coming out, and it's got 4 package levels that you can pay. So the base package is like, which comes with like, you know, I think it comes with like a fairly decent amount of trains, like 60 planes, let's say. Or, no, I think it's like 40. And then there's a deluxe edition that you can buy, which comes with a another 20. And then there's like a gold edition, or a gold premium edition that you can buy that comes with another 20. And then there's a aviator special edition that comes with like that comes with like 50, it comes with like 80 planes, and I'm like, and that costs like, I think it's about 210 euros or something like that. So the base one is 80, and then there's like 140 and 180 intermediaries, and then the top one is about 210. And I'm like, I was looking at the planes that come with the aviator edition. I was like, I want them all. You basically get every plane that the studio who makes Flight Simulator have ever made as a DLC that you can buy individually, but within the package, which is pretty good. I mean, it includes like a 707 and like a short regional plane, regional prop jet, prop, and a oh, what else does it called? Something that made me like, oh, I need to have it. So yeah, I'm probably gonna spend 200 and something euros on that. So yeah, me and simulator money are like easily parted, so long as it's good. So if APTE comes along and with a good simulation, and you can use it in traffic on Preston Carlisle, then I would probably buy it for silly money. But that's just me. I would buy this as its own DLC. If it laid into lots of different routes, I'd love it. Because this train goes everywhere, basically, in real life. And they've got other measurement trains as well. They've got like, well, they might not all be called measurement trains, but they've got the HST. They've got like an old little Sprinter that's like bright turquoise. They've got a bunch of old sort of locos, like a 37 and a I think it's a couple of 73s maybe, that pull a rake of coaches. Trying to think if they got anything else unusual. Or the temptation to open a Google tab, but no, I don't want to. Oh, sorry, let me just yawn. It's like, it's the last night before the clocks change for winter. Oh. Oh no, 2. Throttle 2. 60 miles, and so yeah, we got, so at this speed, so if we were going 60 miles an hour, that would be 1 mile a minute. About 10 minutes. 10 minutes, yeah, which kind of meets up with how fast it was supposed to be. Oh, look at that. Oh, gorgeous. If you wonder why I don't take pictures anymore whilst in the middle of a service, it's because there's a bug that just clears the weather whenever you use the photo mode. I don't know if it's in the base game or if it's because I've installed a mod that just causes that behavior, but it means I wait until I've finished and then I use it so that I can recreate the weather, because once you use the photo in a service, you lose the weather. You can recreate it in the photo mode, but when you come back to the service, it's just clear weather. And I don't like driving in clear weather. My least favourite. It's the worst lighting in the game. And like when the clouds are this good, why would you ever want to drive without them? Actually, I don't know if it only does with dynamic weather. No, I'm not going to try because I'm not going to risk the. Not going to risk not having clouds that are this gorgeous. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. But yes, the thing about diesels, they can go anywhere on the network, so they end up being quite useful as like measuring drains and stuff like that. Like around the like in Spain, they use diesels as well. They do have some electric locos that they use for like the high speed lines and everything. But for like they have some Talgo units they use for have this diesel Talgo inspection train which has the gauge changing, so it can do high-speed international lines and with international gauge, and then the regular lines with their Iberian gauge, and I think they just got a new one that's like electric with a battery as well. Spain doesn't have that many main line railways that aren't electrified. It doesn't have that many railways, to be fair. So, like, it never had. Like, I've got a map right above me, and it shows all the lines, high speed and conventional. And compared to the UK, it's very well. It's very Madrid centric. All the main lines lead to and from Madrid. Maybe the only exception being the Mediterranean corridor, which runs between Murcia and Barcelona, and that's the only real challenge to the sort of all lines lead to Madrid. But it's kind of like if you look at a map of the UK, a lot of the train lines sort of generally lead into London. But yeah, there's whole swathes of the country that have no railways. Oh, look, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on. Right, we're only 8 miles away now, so we're basically nearly there. I wish there was a scenario for this. Well, I wish it was an official DLC and there was a scenario for it. That would be amazing. They could get network rail licensing officially in the game and network rail like measuring trains. That would be pretty good. Because as well as they can literally layer onto anything because they can go anywhere. You could also have scenarios where you have to do things like measure that this bridge has not shifted out of alignment thanks to, like, soil erosion. Max. But those are the things you can do when... These are the things you can do when you have mods. So in your mods, you don't have to worry about copyright or anything like that. You can do this kind of stuff. And I mean, it doesn't matter to me that this light up here doesn't work. If it is a light, it doesn't matter to me that like it's got the GWR in the carriages because it's a mod. Someone did this for free. Good for them. It'd be different if I paid for it, and then I'd expect it to be like vaguely like realistic. Almost read what's on there. Wow. Can't zoom in enough though. It says driver's instruction, HST trailer car dump valves. But then I can't read the actual tiny letters. I think if I use God mode, I'd be able to zoom in enough. But I don't want to like using it. I'm very much a plug and play person. What I like about the mods that this game that I can install here is that like you don't necessarily, most of the time you don't have to worry about them until you install so many that they conflict with one another or they change something that fundamentally that means if you want to free roam or something, you have to turn the mod off. But that doesn't happen that often. Because generally I get on with the timetables of the game. It's usually like a new train comes out and it just doesn't layer in, and I want to use it, so I make use of free roam. And then sometimes there's a mod that means you can't get the livery or something because it clashes. But it's quite rare. For the most part, I just boot up the game, play the way I want to play. That's kind of what I'm hoping for from Flight Simulator 2024 as well, actually, because it's got like it seems to be going in a little bit the direction of this, i.e., with scenarios that are a bit more guided and like a journey mode, more like. Because I've always found with Flight Simulator, it's like it's great, but either it's really tedious flight lessons, or it's you know what to do, just create your own flight. There's never that kind of like sort of hand holding, but with respecting your abilities as well. So it's like really extreme. You're an idiot who doesn't know how to do this, or you know everything, and trying to find that balance in between is difficult. Okay, no. Oh, yes, I know. Got yellows telling us. See, I couldn't see the yellow, but that AWS siren told me there was a yellow. So I can start slowing down. Goodbye, Pendolino. I'm feeling. No, you should try and keep. Okay. Okay, how's it? Down to 40, saunter in for the last 900 yards. I mean, that's the good thing about being a measurement train. Like, no one's waiting for you. there's no passengers. No scheduled arrival time. Okay. Oof, lovely. Oh, and I did get a platinum. I don't know how I get a platinum for a service that's in a mod, but I guess they set it up. The people who are doing it. That's great. Right. Well, that's that. And that's like a shortish video, under 45 minutes. If I can wrap it up in the next 30 seconds. I do recommend this mod. Like I said in my last video, and the one before that, this is quite good. And that is a nice service to run. I mean, you don't do anything particularly technical. It's not a scenario or anything like that. But it's nice to drive the HST on this route and to have a vaguely realistic reason to be doing it. So like the measurement train, like I said, it goes everywhere. Yes, I highly recommend the mod. I highly recommend taking the HST on this route. It's quite a nice one. And I will see you in my next video. Hasta luego.